All right, it is 9:06 a.m. on July 12th. I'm going to call this Board of Equalization meeting to order. We have a quorum, all 5 members are present. Let's go ahead and get started. The first case we have today is application number 51, PID 14262, property owners Harold and Jacqueline Rodriguez. Mr. Rodriguez, good morning.
Good morning.
Let me go ahead and do my introduction first, and then we'll go ahead and get started. So good morning and welcome. We are the Board of Equalization. The board is comprised of 5 citizens of Albemarle County who are appointed by the Board of Supervisors. We're an independent board. Here's how the hearing will work. You'll have 10 minutes to present your case. The assessor will have 7 minutes to present theirs, and you'll have another 3 minutes for rebuttal. During the hearing, we may stop to ask you and the assessor questions. Please note that for Virginia law, there is a presumption of correctness. The burden of proof is going to be on you as the applicant. Before we begin, I'm going to swear in the witnesses. So all persons who intend to testify, please raise your right hand. You solemnly swear or affirm that testimony, both oral and documentary, which you're about to give, will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
I do.
Thank you all. Mr. Rodriguez, any questions before you begin?
The background of everybody here is real estate.
I think so. Everyone has some familiarity, relatively. Like I'm a real estate attorney. Bucky's a realtor. Karen was a commercial appraiser. Evan's an attorney. Bob, I'm sorry. What's your?
I'm an investor.
Investor. So everyone has some, some background in real estate. So any other questions before we begin?
The materials that I provided a couple of days ago have been circulated, and then John's information that
yes. Okay. We have everything, and I imagine all of us have reviewed it before.
And there were 2 different, there was an initial submission and then an additional one that we sent, I think, yesterday.
Yes. Great. Please feel free to.
Sure. Thanks for having me. My name is Hal Rodriguez. I live in Frozag, near the King Vineyard. They've been kind enough to show you a picture of our house. Well, it looks a little better than the one that they showed the other day, but that's it. It's classified as an L1 grade, but in my view, based on looking at the materials out there, it could just as easily been classified as an LL. Initially, they had it classified as a M. It's 1 1/4 stories high, so it's been stretched out to preserve the views of those in the area. And what I'm going to get to later is, and this picture is very important, when you see the whole thing, is 2/3 of it are in forestation. This is an old picture that shows the King Warehouse down on the left. If you go to a current one, they put in something that's 10,000 square feet in a conservation easement zone, which is quite large. We see it for over 6 months of the year, and it's not far from our house. And when I address that later, it's all about the relative property value that they've ascribed here, that I can't find anything else in the market that has a per acre value that is anywhere close to what we've got. I was here 3 years ago to appeal. I thought I provided compelling data to support a reduction in our assessment, but the appeal was denied because your committee said it could not determine a value, and you defaulted to the assessor's value. I guess that's fair. There's no question. We're a over improved property in the area that we live. There's no real good comparables, and that's what your conclusion was. And you went to the experts in the appraiser's office and kept that value. However, the following year, I think my data was compelling, and the assessor did reduce the improvement value pretty significantly. In exchange for that, they increased the land value, which is to my benefit because some of it's in agricultural easements, and my tax bill went down. But that's causing another problem now because it's inflated our land value. And even though some of it's in easement, I do pay about 50% on the use. I don't know how to go to conservation easement. I see a bunch of these properties are in them. They're smaller than ours. I was told I couldn't do it with less than 50 acres, but somehow they've figured out a mechanic, and that apparently eliminates your use. Ours is in forestation. It's not used for anything. The whole property is restricted in what we can build. It's restricted in our ability to cut trees. The Kings have all sorts of rights in our deed, and I don't think any of that's really taken into account in the valuation of our land aspect of this. I am sensitive to your time, and so I apologize for being here for the third time in a few years. But our overall tax bill is going to go up 22%. Our improvement value went up 25%, and I don't think any of the data supports that. And finally, I'm not a real estate expert. I'm a retired CFO of a public company. So I have some analytical skills, but this isn't my forte. So I just tried to gather data as I went through the process. This is what I found. The Federal Reserve says that in Charlottesville County in 2022, there was a 9.9% increase in the home index. So that's what I would think would be the baseline of increasing values. John provided me with sales for our market data, which is 133. We were those sales, and there's only 9 or 10 of them, worth 94% of appraised value, sort of consistent with the 10% inflation rate. And all the other properties, if you go to an exhibit that I put in here that we can spend a little time on at some point, have increased based on my calculations about 13% in improvement value. And that's what I would have expected for us. What I think happened is the assessor, in the materials, they don't provide any information on how they calculated value. They illustrate 3 sales during the year, 2 for L1, 1 for LL. Each was sold for a value greater than assessed value. So I think that's what's driving their view of why our property should have gone up in value. That's 3 sales. There were not many sales in either of those levels, and they excluded 2, as I looked at it yesterday, that were very close to appraised value, very close, being 15% and 20%. One for a smaller parcel in a much nicer area of town, and another for a parcel nearly our size. Most interesting to me when I reviewed the changes in the assessment of those 5 properties, from the 22 valuation to the 23 valuation, 3 of them had no change in land value. So somebody paid for a property that was assessed $3 million. They paid 4.5, and that entire increase went to improvements. The properties were Millington Road, beautiful view of the mountains. Ivy on Turner Mountain, Albemarle, all great properties, yet the land property value didn't go up. Everything was pushed to the value of the improvements, which obviously is to the benefit of the county and additional tax dollars, because people have figured out ways to minimize the tax on the improvements. I can't say that what they're doing is wrong. But what I can say is that it makes no sense. That when you're paying $4.5 million for a property, that all of that value goes to the house. When we look at properties, we look at the property, and the house is sort of secondary, and you make your improvements. I think our property was valued based on the information that John gave me. There's a system called the mass appraisal approach. They use square footage, style, base rate, grade, market area, and age. Those variables you would expect to stay the same year over year. And I put a little analysis in to calculate it under their formula. And what happened was the base rate, which I'm presuming is inflation, increased 15%. Okay, 10 in the index, 15%. But then they did two other things. They increased the grade just for level one. I don't have the data, but it appears in all my analysis that any other level, grade level, wasn't increased. They increased the grade level 10%. That gets me from 15 to 25. Then they made another adjustment on market data to our market area to increase it 5%. Remember those sales in our area that were not at 96% of the property? Okay, that's the 5%. But then what's the 15% inflation rate that they've added in? They're double counting. And so for my class of home, which there's about 25 of in the county, those people have considerably gone up, and I'm whacked that much harder because in my market area where there aren't any other L plus homes, I've also gone up another 5%. And I think that's what's creating the dislocation in what our home is valued and the others. And I think that when they're making changes in the value percentages, which I don't think the model is really anticipating, they need to step in and make a manual adjustment to say whether a 25% increase is reasonable. I don't think a 25% increase is reasonable. My comparatives. I've compared our property to other comparable properties and did not focus on sales, which they were doing. That's all in this exhibit one at the end of my analysis here. All of them, they average out at 13%. I even looked at the properties that were compared in 2000. All of those average out at 13%. I'm not cherry picking. I'm taking the data that's out there. And the market is saying that based on the assessment increases, that 13% should be the reasonable amount for a home like ours. We made no improvements. There were no sales in our adjacent area. So I'm continue to be confused. The assessor also says that the comps that I used were for smaller properties. If you go to the third column over, the only smaller property that I used is the one that's in our neighborhood. It's the highest level home in our neighborhood, and that increased at 9%. I included that there because I think that's representative of our neighborhood. We're valued at 3 times that home. That's the next closest, but that's why the acreage is small, because in our subdivision, we own the largest lot. We combine 2 lots and to protect the one that we've got, and everybody else is somewhere between 2 and 5 acres. But every other property there, I mean, there's a 21 acre property, but they're all large, our size or greater. So I don't understand why the assessor has said that we're comparing smaller properties. And frankly, I don't think it matters whether they're smaller or larger, because I'm focused on improvements. I'm probably running through my time here, so I don't know how much I have left. So I'll quickly go to land. On a per acre basis, we're 3 times anything in the adjacent properties. The assessor has said that we took the wrong properties because a lot of them are at conservation easement. Okay, there were 2 properties that weren't. I just went to the map and looked at the things and brought them up. But they're significantly valued significantly less than ours. And I don't see, even in the exhibit 1 with all the comparables for improvement, I don't see a land and acreage value anywhere close to ours, nor do I see that the assessor who's been silent on it is taking into account any of the restrictions on our property. We're heavily restricted. We can't cut the trees down. That's in our deed. That's what David King insisted when he sold the property to us. We can't build on it. So we have some views that we have to try to work with the Kings to get some foliage down. They put a massive warehouse, 10,000 square feet. It's like an aircraft carrier. right on our property. It's within 15 feet of our property line. We had no rights to stop them. They're in conservation easement. And we didn't receive anything notifying us in advance. So at least I could have had a gentleman discussion with them, but that's dramatically reduced the value of our property. And I don't think the assessor is taking any of that into account. And in summary, I think the 25% increase on the improvements is not reasonable. And I believe that, we've got support by inflation data, market data, and comparable properties that it should have been a much lower amount. On the land, I don't believe that they've taken into consideration the restrictions, and I don't believe it's fairly valued relative to the other properties. And so the data I've tried to lay out as best I can, and hope you'll give some thought to that in your assessment.
Thank you very much, Mr. Rodriguez. Any questions from the board at this time?
Do you have any division rights remaining on your company?
So we combined two. I don't know whether we can uncombine them, but essentially, so we took two 21-acre parcels and put them together. That if I separate them out, which I may be able to do, the reason we bought that property is the only place a house could be put on it, because it's almost all forestation is right on top of ours. Ours is a nice home, as you've seen. So it doesn't really have any value. I did try to, so it's that whole area to the upper right.
Oh, the above the.
Yeah, so the only place that they could have put it is sort of outside of the end of the cul-de-sac there, and we've been right on top of ours. So we have no intention of breaking them apart, but I guess conceivably, I don't know how it works because I legally put them together. Maybe I can legally unwind it.
Any other questions from the board? So assessor now.
Thank you. One thing that I did notice from watching the videos from last week is that I don't talk loud enough in the video. So I think everybody else has heard pretty well, but I'll try to talk louder. So there are a few things I wanted to talk about. Mr. Rodriguez, a lot of what he is speaking to is the amount of change in the assessment. So he provided to you on the front of his supplemental, the second set we sent to you, and it shows the assessments for 23, 22, and 21, and the amount change for the building and land in total. And I wanted to point out, first of all, the amount change from year to year is not really a basis for contesting your assessment. It's really just a change from the way we adjust the model so that we're reaching the market values for all properties. But I did want to point out in here that in 2022, the change on Mr. Rodriguez's property was 4% increase. The change for single family throughout the entire county was 9.5%. So we were below on his that year from the average for the county. His increase was 22% for 2023, and the market was 13.45% for the entire county for single family. But actually, that was for all properties. The average, I mean, the change over time for the market for the entire county was 24.2%. The change over those 2 years, if you use these two, 22% and 4%, is 26.9%. So the amount that Mr. Rodriguez's house changed was actually very close to the average for the entire county. What we do see is in a single year, some properties will get a higher increase than other properties. And on the other side, we'll have some that have a lower increase than the average. And that is because when we're looking at single family properties, we are starting out at the base level of a house by style, and we use all the sales throughout the county to determine what those new rates should be by style. Then we go, once we set those rates to get our numbers to 100%, whether that's up to 100% or down to 100%, depending on the year. Then we start looking at other parts of the model and adjusting those. And one of the things we get to last, or one of the things that we refine is, it's not necessarily last, but what we refine in the process is the amount that a grade has to do with the value of property. So this year, the L+1 homes, the sales that we had, which we had somewhere around 5 to 7 L+1 homes that sold. And those sales indicated that we were too low on L+1. So we adjusted the L+1. The reason why Mr. Rodriguez's increase on his improvements is higher than the norm is because that L+1 was adjusted. After we get through all of those categories of adjustments in the model, the last thing we're doing is adjusting for the neighborhood. In this case, it is market area 133. So Mr. Rodriguez has said the index overall was, I think he said around 9% or something like that. The case Schiller, I think it was market index, but those indexes are averages overall. And those don't apply to individual properties. And we can't just, believe me, I would love it if we could just say every property goes up 10% or 5% or down 2% this year. It would be so much easier. But we really have to defend this or create this model or these values based on a defined model. And our model really shows in this case that obviously values have gone up across the board, and some types of properties went up more than others. And the way we define, Mr. Rodriguez's house, which we've had it defined as an L+1 for at least 3 years now, because we went back just now and checked. I can't remember if there was any change 3 years ago when he appealed the property on the grade or not. But I know that we've had that grade the same. It's this, the way we treat that grade has changed. Overbuilt for a neighborhood, that was another comment. In the rural area, you will find a wide variety of homes. If you were to have in Farmington, in Forest Lakes is a pretty homogeneous neighborhood. It still has some variation in the grade of homes that are built, but if you were to have a mansion built in Forest Lakes, it would really be out of place. And there would probably be something we need to do to adjust for that. However, a property in the rural area, there's no real overbuilt for a property, for a home in the general sense of being in the rural area. We have a lot of properties in the rural areas that are luxury or higher. And it's not just Farmington or something like that that has all of those properties. And finally, I think I had one more point, but it's eluding me now. But that, I'll leave it at that. Unless you have any questions.
Any questions from the board?
Yeah, I do have a couple of questions. Explain to me a little bit, how is that neighborhood adjustment applied?
So that
Is it applied to the building improvements and the land?
So the neighborhood, the land is adjusted by setting the rate itself. So if we're at $100,000 for a home site or $110,000 for a home site, that's how we adjust for the land.
Okay.
The multiplier for the neighborhood goes only to the improvement.
Okay.
And I don't know if that changed this year.
So your base rate, where he's saying his 2023 valuation is driven by 3 variables. Is he talking about the improvements, the base rate, neighborhood adjustment, and grade factor? All 3 of those apply to the improvements only.
So the base rate, yes.
Yeah.
So the base rate we're talking about by style.
Yes.
So in his case, make sure I'm still on the right property. Yes, the base rate is now $108.30, $108.70.
Okay.
And that's based on it being, I believe, was it a 1.5 story?
Right.
$108.07.
Or 1 story.
Okay.
1.5. And that would have gone up from I think we talked about this last week,
Yeah.
maybe $80-something to $188 to $108 roughly.
94 to 180. I'm looking at his model.
Okay.
Okay. Okay.
So that would have been the initial change we make to the model to get all properties up to close to 100% median ratio.
Okay.
Yeah. And then the other parts of that, the grade factor adjustment is what changed what I was just talking about. We changed the multiplier this year. We didn't change the grade L+1, but we found that L+1 needed more value overall based on the sales. And that changed. For instance, and I don't know the exact number, it might have changed from 3.5 to 3.85 or 3.65 to 3.85, but right now it's 3.85.
Okay.
The neighborhood adjustment, which is 1.05, that applies to all properties within the improvements on all properties within that market area.
Okay.
And I don't know if that changed this year or not.
You got five.
It was 100% last year, it went to 105%.
Yeah, 105%. Okay. And grade factor 10%.
Correct. And we've had other neighborhoods that we've talked about where we went from 100% to 120% on the improvement value. I mean, the multiplier to capture the value of the improvements.
Any other questions?
Yeah, I have a question. What struck me is that Mr. Rodriguez has a warehouse.
Correct.
In a property next door, 50 feet from his property line. Does the county adjust anything for that? It seems 6 months out of the year.
We are not
Use shed
adjusting.
issue or whatever.
We are not adjusting for that. And I don't know if John, did you see that from the house or do you have?
No,
any
I couldn't,
information?
at that time, I couldn't see it from the house, no, because it foliage was on the trees, and everything then, so no, you couldn't.
How far is that building away? Can
From
you
his
mention that?
house?
Yeah.
Yeah, I can tell you that. So, let's say from the pool here, which is the closest. $537 feet, approximately 500 feet.
It's 30 feet high.
And how about elevation?
Yeah, that's what I'm gonna have to put on.
The elevation, possibly a little bit lower than our elevation. It's lit. There's a massive amount of traffic. I do, from a market perspective, it will have an impact. It significantly devalued our house, unfortunately. We thought conservation easement meant conservation easement, but obviously it does not. And they're indicating that they could put another one right next to it in the little sliver of a view that we've got, because they're not restricted. This is business. So we happen to be in a commercial area.
Any other questions?
Yeah, Mr. Rodriguez, do you feel like your home is properly graded at the L+1, or do you feel like that's correct?
Well, it used to be a mansion. And so I've appealed almost every year. And although the last time I was here, they didn't remember a lot of that. I've never taken it to this level other than what I did 3 years ago. And I did get the mansion classification changed to an L+1. If I'm allowed, I just pulled because it has very many pictures in the system. These are L homes.
I can pass it on.
Okay, and it's just the front and the back of each. And I couldn't tell the difference between these homes and mine and where it's, and you see, I put little calculations, that's the improvement increase on all of those. And what it gets to is the importance of the grade classification. And I think there's about 25 L+ homes in the county. And I presume, I don't have access to the data that they do, but what I was provided. And figured out that the L plus homes went up 10%. And our market area went up 10% beyond that, base inflation rate. I think those are exceptions, for an isolated group of homes. I presume that they were all charged at 10%, that they didn't, cherry pick within that group. And then, the market data. So, I think you could just as easily grade our home as an L, as an L plus. Those are all Ls.
That's it. We're running obviously over time now, but do you have any other rebuttal you wanted to add to?
Yeah, quickly. The 2-year thing makes no sense to me. I thought this was a 1-year process, and what they did last year, we'd all be impacted similarly in the next year. And I find our number, way out of whack with that. Secondly, the sales of the L plus 1 properties, I think there's only 3 that were within third-party transfers. And yes, they were above assessed value, but I don't think you just take the broad category and say for that. And as I mentioned before, those properties are really good views. Those that like views would really like it. They've pushed, when you look at how they've changed the assessment, they've driven 100% of the value change to improvements. That seems odd to me. And as I just mentioned, the market area, the indication was that went up 5%. And they've added that to ours, but they've also built that into the inflation factor. So it makes no sense to me. And that's why we're driven to this large result. And finally, I think the land speaks for itself. It needs to be looked at and evaluated properly.
Can I add one more thing, Mr. Solid? One thing I missed that John just pointed out to me. This house is 7,413 square feet. It's very large. It has kind of like a mother-in-law suite kind of attached to it. We made a negative 20% adjustment to the improvements based on that size and that layout. Right. So I just wanted to point that out.
Just one last comment. About 40% of the house is below grade. So it's a basement with 1 half window and in that 7,000 square feet. And the reason for that is, per David King, we were to drop our house so that others in the area could have a view of the mountaintop that we see from our home. So it's not comparable to having great views out of
That's, I think, an
30% of the house.
important consideration. So the question,
So I'll correct
Yeah.
that. I'd like to do that while he's here.
yeah,
7,413 square feet is above grade. We have an additional 2,400 square feet finished basement on top of that. Out of 2,900 square feet of basement, 2,400 is finished. So the 7,400 square feet is above grade.
does that,
I can't dispute what they're doing. That doesn't sound right to me.
they have a sketch. I mean, what they do is they'll take measurements from the outside, so.
So does that include the garage, all the?
Should have done.
other
No,
spaces?
that's not the garage or the porches. As you see on the sketch up here, the blue areas are finished living area. These would all be above grade. Unless you see the basement where it shows, that's like the basement's under that main section right here. All the rest is just living area. That's the second floor. That's an additional just single 1 floor area or 1-story area of the first floor. This is that kind of separated, I call it mother-in-law suite. That's attached through kind of a breezeway to the house that we add to the square feet. And it's finished just like the rest of the house.
It is separate. There's no access through the house. You have to go outside to get it.
And that's part of our adjustment for the 20%. And I think we talked about this 3 years ago also.
So you get the 20%. what he's talking about, the 20%. So they've taken the value of your property with the 7,400 square feet, but because it's large for the market, or I mean also, or just
Large even for.
Yeah.
The L+1.
large for an L+1, plus the fact that you have the separated area, they're reducing your total, what otherwise would have been your improvement value by 20% to reflect the fact that it is larger than the market. So, so they've already taken into consideration that 20% reduction, so.
Yeah, we would have normally called this size house a mansion, which we did originally. But because the finishes weren't mansion finishes, it was really L finishes, so we brought it down to L and then put the -20 for this.
And the upstairs doesn't have an attic. It is the attic, and that's counted as, space. And it's got cinder block walls that are about this thick, so the stucco could go on them. They count that from the exterior. So if you go around the whole perimeter, that's a lot of space.
Okay, anything further?
Nope.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
We will confirm, make a decision and mail you the decision within the next 2 weeks.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a nice day.
Thank you, you too.
Thank you.
All right, we're gonna be going to our next hearing. It's McFarlane Stonefield LLC. Don't mind having a seat over here. And if maybe you want to pull up another chair to the side of it. All right, this is application number 79, PID 23541, property owners McFarlane Stonefield LLC. I think you all were here when I did the introduction, and we were running late. So do you have any questions or do you want me to anything else? Or
I'm good, thank you.
all right, we go ahead and get started then.
Sure.
Oh, yeah, I need to swear you in. That's
Yeah.
right. Thank you, Karen. All right, for all those who are testifying, please raise your right hands. Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony with oral documentary which you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth? Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Charles McFarlane, managing member of McFarlane Stonefield. And also one of the owners. It's a family business LLC. My father, who's 93 years old, started a hospitality firm in Roanoke, and my brother, who actually lives in Whitehall, Mount Fair Farm, not too far from where the gentleman lives that you just heard a case from, is also an owner and of this property as well as our other hospitality properties. I have with me Zach Harrison, who's a summer intern from Richmond, attends Bucknell. He helped put together the research information, which I'm going to share with you. And Bob Smith, who is our GM for Blue Ridge Hospitality Group, which manages our hospitality property. So thank you for this opportunity to present our case before you. And it's really a very simple case from our perspective. And I'll share with you the comments. The appeal, the basis for our appeal, and we've been through a number of tax assessment appeals in other jurisdictions, but the basis in this instance on this property for this appeal is that it's not equitable. And it's not equitable for comp profits. And there's there are probably two good reasons for that, or I don't know if they're good reasons, two reasons for that. And the primary reason is very simple. This property, which is unusual, sits on about 1 acre of land. And typically a hotel of this size would sit on 3.5 acres of land in a mixed use or suburban set. I was the one that negotiated with Eden's Avant, the original developers of this property back in 2011. And oversaw the entitlement of the site and the development and construction of the property. So very involved in all of the documents that make up the basis for this property, but suffice to say that a good portion of the land which we use for the hotel is not part of this deed or not part of this title of this property. It sits, and that actually is, I think, a little generous. I think it sits, property line sits about 5 feet outside of the building perimeter, for the most part. There is some area where it comes out around the porte cochere. But a good portion of the site's improvements, which are beneficial to the hotel, sit outside of the property line. They include, the land that was graded, storm drainage, retention, the utility extension, water, sewer, gas, electricity, the site lights, all the landscaping, irrigation, pavement, curb, gutter, roadway improvements, driveway entrances, signage, the dumpster, the entire dumpster area enclosure is outside of the property lines. And some of the electric charging stations which service the hotel tenant or clients. So, and what it seems to us and to me, and if you look at the handout that I've given you, is that the per square foot value on the land that actually sits under the hotel, this hotel, is been valued at a much higher per square foot basis than all of the comps by a factor of 3.5 times. And that could account for, in our opinion, up to $2 million of value. And the improvements on that land, the beneficial improvements on that land, could account for another about $1.5 million. So while the assessor in this instance gave us a modest adjustment for the previous appeal that we did administratively, we do not think that he or she have taken into account the true different characteristics of this property in this instance, which is the basis for our appeal. And the other, I think there are some other reasons why our value is higher on both a per unit basis and a square foot basis, is because it's my understanding that the assessor does a income approach for hospitality. And in my opinion, that discriminates against good operators. These guys do a good job of operating our property, and we run it more effectively, more efficiently. We get higher ADR, we get higher occupancy, we get higher RevPAR, and then the assessor puts a factor on that and determines a value, allocates it to improvements in the land. And in doing so, because we're more successful because of the way we run our property, we operated through COVID. We kept our employees. We pay them well. We have managers who've been with us for many, many years, and our employees who've been with us for many, many years. So we get repeat customers, and because we do those things, we get a higher NOI, and therefore we end up paying a higher tax. And I think that discriminates in this environment, that discriminates against well-run properties. And it's not a real estate tax. It's a business, ongoing business operating tax, which I think is unfair. So I think that part of the inequitable valuation in our instance is derived from their approach for valuing hospitality properties and not building real estate. And the fact that the land under this particular property is much less than what is under other similarly developed and titled hospitality properties. And therefore, the adjustment should be in an amount, close to 3 million of value to get us closer on a per unit or per square foot basis of the other comp properties in Albemarle County. And
Thank you. Any questions from the board?
I do have a quick question. Can you tell me about your parking? Do you pay for that parking?
we do not,
You do not,
we do not. We, part of the arrangement that we did with the county, and I've been in this room many times for meetings with county officials and with the Architectural Review Board, but we negotiated an unusual arrangement. It's the first, I think, in Albemarle County with Eden's Avent, where we have shared parking. And so because of the mixed use development, we share our parking with the retail and with the apartments that have been developed around the hotel. And so, and it was a difficult thing to negotiate with our lenders because lenders like to know that we have dedicated parking. We have some dedicated parking, but most of the parking that we have is shared parking with the other uses within Stone.
Any other questions? I'll turn it over to the assessor.
So I do agree that this is a simple case, that and we do not believe that the income approach is inappropriate for any hospitality properties. The unusual part of this property is that shared parking. Now, let's say if you're looking at the picture up here, if this was a separate parcel and that was their parking for this hotel, we would, when we did the income approach, we would subtract the value of that other parcel off the value of this one. We would also not include, if there was any rent that was paid for the second one, we wouldn't include that in the analysis. So we would adjust for that. In this case, there's no rent paid for that. There's an agreement that goes along with it. It's not dedicated, but it's shared. But that comes out in the income and the expenses that are realized for the property. We are using the actual income and expenses. 2021 is the statements we were using, and that is shown on the the income form that we shared with you, and that information, we don't, I mean, no offense to the owners of the property, but we don't see this as being any better or more well-run than other properties. I mean, some are better than others, but in general, we don't see this as exceptional results for hotels based on all the hotels we see. So we don't feel that there's any extra value being included for the property based on results.
And you would have no problem adjusting the assessment to what the average of the comp set is?
Yeah, I'd have a huge problem with that. So this property is getting the results it has for the location it's in, not because it's all the way up by the northern part of the county, up 29. The land value here is this area around Stonefield is one of the highest valued land for commercial property in the county. Of course, the land value is going to be higher. All the properties around it have sold for a lot more money. The property right across the street, but actually two across this property and this property were the most recent sales. And this is valuable land. So as part of our assessment, we're going to reflect the land appropriately. However, that land value, whatever that land value is just subtracted from the total income value. So as we do the income approach, the land value is just a component of that, but it doesn't determine the income value. It just breaks down the land and improvements. We did make a change on the initial review because we were given actual income. And we use that actual income to determine what the appropriate value was. Now, these properties, all hospitality properties, suffered during the pandemic. They also, got help from PPP loans. They had different ways to survive the pandemic. But one of the things is that this property in 2019, we had $18.5 million, 16 million in 2020, and we dropped to 10.5 million because of the pandemic. And that was directly because of issues with travel and hospitality that were going on during that time. We were at 11.1 last year. So, that was still a holdout from the pandemic. But now we're back. I mean, the hospitality industry has recovered greatly. These are actual results. And we believe that that the value is appropriate, that the issue with parking is not an issue. It's not something that needs to be adjusted for, and certainly none of this, whether it's a concern about how well the property's run or the parking issue, is not worth $5 million difference. I'm sorry, maybe it's $4 million difference in what the applicant is asking for, $4.7 million. But we feel that this is appropriately assessed.
Any questions on the board? Assessor? Back to the applicant.
I think it's interesting that the basis for justification of the assessment is that this is more valuable land. But yet the basis of our appeal is the fact that we have about a third of the land that you would normally have. And that land is already being assessed and taxed to Stonefield. So someone's paying tax on that land. If he gets what he's asking in this instance, it's double taxation. You're getting it from Stonefield because they're paying on the land that we're using, even though it's shared parking. And getting it from us because he's done an income approach. That's not equitable. It's not fair. I can't have it both ways. I'll repeat my position that I don't think it's fair to fully assess real estate based on an income approach and then justify the higher valuation above a comp set because of its land. And then in this instance, have the land be, a fraction, 30% or less of what normal land area is under a building. I mean, our valuation should be under the comp set. I'm suggesting that it's okay, you get it close to the comp set. And I think that's a fair basis of appeal. And I hope you all would agree that that is it's an inequitable, allocation of value. And then again, in this instance.
Any questions this time from the board? Mr. Farland, we thank you for your time. We will confirm, make a decision, and send it out within 2 weeks.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Looks like we have the next applicant here. Does anybody need a break before the next hearing? I think it's the last one we have in person, but later this morning. So. Ready to go, everyone? And which one is this? Okay, thank you. So this is application number 19. Yeah, ID 22177, property owner Belk Stores of Virginia LLC.
Doing good.
I'm Peter.
Hey, Peter, Jim Jordan, we spoke briefly.
I feel like I've met you before. Okay.
Well, it's been, so I used to do Virginia for Bell
Okay.
years and years ago. I have been here. Actually, at that time, we actually met at the mall.
Okay. All right. Well,
But I have been here before.
Okay, I also want to make sure that the board got your.
Awesome. Yeah, it's very nice to see everybody.
Thank you. As we get set up, I'll go ahead and do our introduction. Good morning and welcome. We're the Board of Equalization. The board is comprised of 5 citizens of Albemarle County who are appointed by the Board of Supervisors. We are an independent board. Here's how the hearing will work. You're gonna have 10 minutes to present your case. The assessor will have 7 minutes to present theirs, and you will have another 3 minutes for rebuttal. During the hearing, we may stop to ask you the assessor questions. I'm assuming you're aware of the presumption of correctness. One thing I want to note that the level of expertise on this board is on the relatively higher side, so you don't have to dumb down the information that you provide to us. And before we begin, I'm going to swear in the witnesses. That looks like you want to give us. I'll let you give us
If
the
y'all
documents
have
first.
these. It's a break some, so wrong.
Yes. Thank
Nice
you.
computer and process.
Thank you.
Break down. the Points I'll make. A breakdown.
Okay.
Of comps that's in the
Excellent.
package.
Right, thank you.
More for me, but I figured out.
All right, so let's go ahead and do this swearing in of the witnesses. All those who have testified, please raise your right hand. You solemnly swear or affirm the testimony of oral and documentary which you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
I didn't.
Thank you. Jordan, any questions before we begin?
I don't think so.
Please proceed.
Okay. So I'm here on Belk's behalf and the value on this store is overvalued for well, a couple of reasons. One of the ones I want to focus on is how it's valued relative to the other stores. Granted, the Sears is closed and the Penny's is closed. That'll speak to the environment that department stores and enclosed malls are in, and we'll touch on that. That is one of the more central points. I'd love to say I've got a tremendous outpouring of comps for transactions. I have a lease comp. We actually lease the men's store and own the women's store. We don't have appeal rights to the men's store, so I can't appeal it. So, and we pay $4.50 in rent. And so I have supposed to that, even though the Belk store, the owned portion is twice as big as the men's store. And we had discussed that my previous trip, which is many years ago. But that all being said, I'll go through just some of the more pertinent parts. If you'll skip to, well, it's about page 7 or 8, it's this one, it's kind of a summary page. So the Belk store is 124,811 feet. And they pay $4.50 or right at $4.50 for the men's store. If you use the 5% vacancy and 5% expenses for a department store typically are a little bit higher than that, but a management fee alone would be 5%. So 5% is a nominal number. And then used a 9 cap. So cap rate is always a big question here. This is currently in its present state a C-class mall. There's one department store open. The vacancy at the mall is, I spent quite a bit of time there yesterday, I'll just say it's at least 50%. The corridor where Belk is pretty full. Either end, 0. So, and that speaks to how these were developed. So when these malls were developed, they put the department stores on the perimeter. People went into the stores and then shopped on the interior. Today's method of developing shopping centers is different. Just drive up to the door, so they're more lifestyle centers. If I want to go shop at Belk, I drive up to Belk, I go buy my Belk stuff. Maybe I'll walk a couple of doors down. But ultimately, it's drive up to the door. I'm going where I want to go. So the development of these enclosed malls is no longer a thing. They don't do it anymore. And they don't do it because of people's shopping habits. People's shopping habits were changing dramatically due to online shopping going into COVID. COVID exacerbated that situation because people like me that shopped at the stores couldn't. So people's shopping habits that normally shopped one way were forced to change because, well, I still want this or I still want that. And the only way to get it was online. So these, once again, they're white elephants. They're typically these days redeveloped in some capacity or another. I know there's been a transaction at the mall. Home Depot now owns the entirety of the mall, with the exception of the Belk store. What their plans are long-term, I don't know. I did discuss that transaction, and I know in talking both to the county and to an appraiser here locally, the mall's kind of got some hair on it regarding transaction. So, but obviously it was bought. The mall had been foreclosed on. You know, Home Depot, I don't know what their plans are. I don't even know that they know what their plans are. According to the person I talked to, they're still trying to develop their strategy. What they wanted more than anything was to control what went on around them. So they purchased the mall for that purpose primarily. They may not have a plan. I'm not privy to it. And the appraiser that I talked to didn't know specifically. Excuse me. That all being said, if you use the $4.50 rent with 5% expenses and a 9 cap rate, you come up to a value of about $5.6 million or a little bit over. As you can see, the next page is our sales page. I don't think there's any shock here. Our sales were charting down. COVID, you know, put a hole in it. And while it has recovered a little bit, it certainly has not recovered to the standard that it was previously. And these are, excuse me, overall sales. So this page reflects both the men's store and the women's store. And so, as you can see, the sales have just charted down dramatically. The next page is kind of what our sales look like relative to the square footage. And then, excuse me, the next chart of sales is a pro rata of the overall sales to the owned space. And then the next page you get to is the straight rent method page, and that we've discussed. That's a $4.50 rent with a 5% vacancy and expense and a 9 cap. And that shows you where that number is. That $45 a foot number we'll get to again here in just a few minutes. The next page says dollars and cents, and this is using shopping guide of centers. So if I were to go out and get an MAI appraisal on this property, they would quote this in that guide. And granted, this information, this was last published in 2008. I'm holding it for that reason, but this does track enclosed malls. Guess when enclosed malls quit being developed? Long before 2008. So the information regarding expenses and rents and all that other stuff really are still fairly applicable. This would be what they call a regional shopping center. The rent for regional shopping centers is $3.30, which is obviously below the $4.50 rent that Bill pays at the place that we rent. The next page is the tiered rent method. That tiered rent method is basing rent on sales. So the last time the economy got really bad, back in my youth, developers needed to attract tenancy. And that was difficult because interest rates were astronomical. People's spending was really small, gas prices were going through the roof, there were lines, I mean, it was bad. And the only way to attract a tenant into the property was to incentivize them. So they didn't charge them rent, they just charged them a percentage of sales as rent. Not an overage, but as rent. So if my sales were great, I paid more rent and I didn't really care because it made sense. If my sales were bad, you didn't get a lot of rent, but you got a tenant. So while these are still fairly uncommon, Belk has entered into one of these in Ohio. So Belk's obviously footprint typically doesn't include the Midwest. It's mostly a Southern brand, but in taking on some, I think it was a Macy's mall in an area that we were not familiar with, nor were people typically familiar with Belk. This was an arrangement that we made. So while it is still fairly uncommon or really uncommon, it's not that it isn't used, it's just rarely used. But I include that just to say this is another way that Belk looks at their values. And then they also back into what it would take to kind of justify the county's value. So in this case, the county's value is a little over 8.8 million. And at a 9 cap, that would be like a $7 rent or a Belk store at an enclosed mall, which is almost empty. And where Belk is the only big box tenant still there. They back into the cap rate. So backing into the cap rate at a $4.50 rent with a 5% vacancy and expense, you'd be looking at a cap rate of 5.7. This is a C-class mall with a tremendous amount of vacancy and one major tenant. That's not a 5.7 cap. I would also say that cap rates not only are based on the class of mall, but they're based on the size of the marketplace. So I'm in Birmingham. Birmingham is a tier 4 marketplace. So the tier 1 is the top 10, tier 2's top 25, tier 3, top 50, and so on. So Birmingham falls in a tier 4 marketplace. Charlottesville's a really nice town. I drove around most of it yesterday, but it's not as big as Birmingham. And while it's nice, it's probably not even a tier 4 marketplace. So that's just to say, if I took an 8 cap rate at a class A mall and added 50 basis points every time I went down a classification and every time I went down a tier, I'd be adding over 200 basis points to whatever you want to call that cap A space in tier 1 market, which is probably for retail somewhere around 6.5. So you add 200 basis points to that and get wherever you want to get, or more than 200 basis points, because it's 200 basis points in tier and another 100 basis points in cap. So it's really more like 300 basis points. That all to say, it's a long way away. The next thing I look at is what it would take to, what kind of sales would it take to justify that county's value, and it's $283, and you know, I just never. So I mean, you know, that's not what it looks like. The next page is kind of a summary of values and the comparables that are here, and so I'm going to focus a little bit of this. And this is more along where this is as well. That's just fleshed out a little more. But obviously the Belk currently is valued at a little over $70 a foot. The JCPenney is at 59, a little under $60 a foot. The Sears, which is now going to be the Home Depot, is at $67 a foot. The interesting thing is all the land is about a little under $13 a foot. The Belk building is $31 a foot, almost $32 a foot, and there's $1,000 in improvement value for the Pennies and the Sears. And the men's store, which we lease, which is really more of a footprint store than, they don't have a tremendous amount of parking, so it's more of a footprint store. They're carrying $660,000 of value, which is $11 a foot. That store's as open as my store. And it's half the size. I mean, so when I say this is really where I want to focus, this is where the biggest issues are. There's also a transaction on the Pennies from 2020 which was 4.5 million. That's $46 a foot. For a store, which quite honestly, I walked around yesterday. If you took all of Belk's clothes out and put that iron gate down, you know, it would look just like the penny store, which I saw walking around the mall. It would look no different. It would look exactly the same as the penny store, which is empty. And the only purchaser really for the Belk store is the mall owner, because they're the only one who are going to have something to do with it. And that's redevelop it at some point in time when they redevelop everything else. The building as it stands today has value to one person, and that's my client. I mean, there's not a marketplace for it. Look at the Sears, look at the Pennies. I mean, there's not a big market for a closed department store, which is 100 and something thousand square feet in a C-class mall. There's just not an independent marketplace for that. And so the $46 a foot transaction price, if you multiply that times the size of my client's property, you get $5,750,000, which the land portion of this is $5,470,000. So there'd be a little bit left for the improvement, which is how the other department stores at this mall are being valued on an improvement basis, a little bit something else. And that's really all that building is worth, is a little bit something else. And the rest of this is support documentation. There's obviously some information about the mall, the realty rates is in here, the score guide is in here. That all information is all in there, and support documentation. And like I said, this really is just a fleshed out version of what we just discussed. And then there's also the stuff showing the values from the county on the different parcels. So that is really my client's point of contention.
Thank you. Any questions from the board?
Yeah, would Belk leave if it didn't get a break on its assessment?
Would they leave?
Yeah.
So I'll answer the question this way. That decision is made way above my pay grade. I will say that financially, Belk is, I mean, y'all may not be aware, or you may, maybe you are, maybe you track it, but Belk's been in foreclosure as well. Now, their foreclosure was the shortest in history in America. It was 24 hours. But it gave them time. It was during COVID. You know, they had trouble paying their bills like everybody else during COVID, but that just shows you how close they were already. You know, that they just got to the point where they couldn't. So the reorganization didn't take very long, but it was more of a pause button. So to answer your question, I don't know if they would leave, but they do think in disrespect that they're being, in some respects, a little punished for being open. I mean, I don't want to borrow this gentleman's phrase, for being a better operator. But Belk is the only one that's open, and their value is dramatically higher than anyone else's. And maybe they were poor business people. I don't know. Look, I represent Sears as well. Sears doesn't have any Virginia stores. So, I mean, you know, so Penny's closed something like 4,000 of their stores across the country. And the only reason they're open in some of their better malls is the person that bought them was a mall developer that didn't want the vacancy. They were bought by Simon Brookfield and said, hey, you're going to keep your stores open. We're going to keep our stores open in our malls and we're not going to worry about everybody else's stores. So Simon Brookfield is the one that owns Penny's, not some innocuous other retailer. The mall developer who didn't want 8,000 closed Penny stores bought them to keep their vacancy from going poorly. So anyway, like I said, I would have loved to appeal the other store for these same reasons, but I didn't get a chance. So I'm only here to advocate for the owned portion of this property, and that's the women's side, the big one. So And that's ultimately, I don't know the answer to your question. I will say that Belk, in the midst of their foreclosure, they didn't close stores. They did start a process, which is not uncommon, of taking some stores and downgrading them to outlet store. So now, is that what would happen here? I don't, the reality is your sales going into COVID at this store were in the middle. So this isn't a bad store. I mean, if that's what you're asking, this isn't a bad store. The reality is there's not a lot else there to draw people to this mall. So that's ultimately at some point in time gonna be a problem. In that, you know, there was a symbiotic relationship at these enclosed malls between the outside anchors and the internal space. And even a lot of that internal space, those companies, I mean, the Limited was forever an anchor at the inside portion of a mall with 10,000 square feet. They don't exist anymore. You can buy from the Limited, but you have to go shop at Limited online to do it. You know, and there's a preponderance of those types of stores that used to just be staples that don't exist anymore. And so to answer your question, I don't know, but this store, historically speaking, would be moderate. It'd be in the middle. And once again, I know why they continue to lease the store, because the lease runs through another 4 years. So they haven't been able to, I think it's through 2029, 2030. So, I mean, you know, now would they at some point say, we're going to move all that stuff over here? That would make some sense to me, but that's not a decision that I've made. So.
Any other questions on the board? I had a quick question, just on looking on the Woodmont thing, which is not yours. I just want to clarify, because they're saying that the men's store, and you talked about the 450 lease, the ground lease. Is that a ground lease or is it?
So they consider it owned. I think they paid $1 for a 99-year ground lease, I think is effectively.
Right, but I'm saying the 450, was the Belk built the building or was it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
On the men's side?
No.
Oh, that's what I'm saying, on the men's
Oh,
side.
the men's
it's
side.
on the ground.
Yeah,
I know the whole property is under a ground.
Yeah,
lease,
the
but
men's side is a lease.
It's a lease.
It's a lease.
Between you guys, between Belk, it was a lease, the
Yeah,
450.
lease with
Okay.
whoever.
That's what I was
the mall
trying.
owner was. Yeah.
Okay, appreciate it. All right, turn it back to the assessor now.
Thank you. So Mr. McFarland in the last case said this is a very simple case. This is as far from simple as you can get when you're talking about the small and the anchor properties around it. And I just want to make sure it's clear that yes, Home Depot purchased the mall. They paid $1.7 million just for and we talked about this last week, actually, those 4 tiny little parts that would be simple.
Right.
They paid 20 million, a little over 20 million for the leased part over the ground lease, the improvements, basically, the right to use the improvements for the term of the lease. And so that is absolutely in, flux. Home Depot, I have the same information. They don't know what they're doing. All they know is they're going to build a Home Depot where the Sears is. And they don't know yet what they're going to do unless something's changed since I found this out. They don't know what they're going to do with the rest of the mall.
I'm sorry, you said 20 million?
20,200,000, I believe, is the amount.
Something like that.
Okay.
And yes, the JCPenney is closed. It's sold. The Sears is closed. It's going to be torn down. We basically have no value on the improvements for the Sears. The men's Belk, we have a minimal value on, or a lower value. Correct. That, of course, reflects land and building, because the rent does not reflect the whole thing. It just reflects the building part of it. Even though they're getting to use the whole thing. Also, in my experience, when we're talking about anchors to a mall, the rents can vary greatly. Now, there is a symbiotic relationship between the anchors and the inline stores. But typically, the mall owner wants the anchors to be full in order to pull people into the mall for the inline stores, which they get a much higher rate per square foot for in rent. But I've seen where a anchor would pay $1 per year, not $1 per square foot, but $1 per year in rent. And if they exceeded a certain revenue amount, they would pay more. But it was really, they wanted, as he said, they want that mall, that anchor to be open so that you don't have more vacancy and it keeps the mall alive. So it's very hard sometimes to use those rents from those mall anchors to determine an income approach. And that's kind of my point with saying that is you can have rents all over the place. And the motivation isn't really to create a value, create a rent that just values that, return on that anchor, but there's a lot more to the dynamics around setting that rent up. So, and then finally, in this case, this Belks, we do a cost approach. We have the building basically fully depreciated, 60% physical depreciation, 20% externals because of the issues at the mall. So we're bringing down the cost approach by 80%. And that is how we are coming up with the current value that we have, the land value plus the cost approach, which in our for these big boxes, it's the best approach that we can use to come up with an equitable value. And we'll answer any questions you may have.
Any questions?
Yeah, so why did you use 20% on the women's side and 30% external on the men's side?
That is a good question. And I don't have an answer for it.
Any other questions?
I think because I don't know for sure, but I think it was done because the men's is at the back, at the rear, and doesn't have visibility. So it's even more hurt by the fact
Yeah,
that they're behind the mall,
And it's
so to speak.
part of the mall ownership. That's our explanation, whether that's appropriate or not.
Any other questions? I'll turn it back to the applicant for rebuttal. Do you have anything else to add?
I mean, not dramatically. I mean, we've discussed this, so I mean, he's correct. The generating a rent for these specific, and once again, I'm talking about the enclosed mall model. Our rents were dramatically lower, and they were for a variety of reasons. First, size was a component. Second was national advertising was a component. We're doing all the advertising that brings people out to go to all the inline space. And that to me speaks more to why specifically this one rent might be very well $1 a foot with some rent component, because sales component, because we're the only one that's open. There's not a Penny's, there's not a Dillard's, there's no one else attracting people to the inline space except my client. And that's our own store and our lease store, and they're right across from one another. And once again, maybe mine's visible and theirs is not, but they're still going to a Belk store. And, the men's store, while a component of the parcel, has a separate number and is valued at $11 a foot. My own store, which is twice as big, is valued at, on the improvement part, more than double that, which my client doesn't understand. My own store is twice as big and its value is twice as much. Maybe I'm simple that way, but that doesn't make sense to me. And and once again, pointing back to specifically the Penny's transaction at $46 a foot, which is even 25% smaller than my client's store, it's less than 100,000 feet. Mine's 100, almost 125. At $46 a foot, times the square footage of my client's property, that's 5,700,000, which, and once again, if the land is what it is, we're not debating that. There's a little bit left for the building, and that's really what it ought to be, a little bit left for the building.
Any other questions? All right, Ms. Jordan, we thank you for your time. We will confer and make a decision, mail a decision over the next 2 weeks.
I appreciate y'all's time. Thank you very much.
Should we have a 10-minute break?
That'd be wonderful.
Right, 10-minute break it is. Do you mind pausing the recording?
Oh, yes, thank you.
10:41.
And hopefully I got y'all that.
I always love one.
Always the first. I know talking to the.
All right, we're back. What should we start with? Anybody have any? Should we do the most recent? Go with Bell? Go from there or? Go with the, or should we go with the easiest one? Which I think one of those is easier than the others. So, let's do Bell. Okay, so Bell is a tough one. Pete, if you don't mind pulling up the, you mind pulling up the map on this one? So this one's 10 acres, so this is a bigger lot than some of the other ones there, isn't it? And it has frontage right on 29. I mean, is there consideration right now, I mean, obviously that's the land value part versus the building part, and they're arguing more the building, but is there consideration with the fact that it fronts 29, has that much frontage on 29, does it make a difference when you guys are valuing those small
We
properties?
have not made a difference in the value for these properties that are all in the mall. We do actually decrease it because even though it fronts on 29, if you're driving down the road, you can't really see Bell because it's higher. Right on the side of the road, it's higher, that blocks it. So we made an adjustment downward for that to the land. But we do the same thing, I believe, for all of these properties.
I'm inclined to reduce it as an initial kind of thought on this one, just because the structural value seems high, but.
Well, yeah, I think looking at, I mean, I do agree that, you know, that 30% external obsolescence should be applied consistently, even though it's on front side. Really. I mean, it's all part of a. You
It's
know,
the same external
it's,
situation.
yeah.
And I've made that change right here on the page. So if you wanted to see what effect it was, we can look at that.
So what would that be?
It would drop that. So this is with the 30% and the 60% for the physical, and 7,289,300. So that's about a $1.6 million reduction.
Oh, okay. And so what would be the per square foot of the land? I mean, of the building improvements then?
Of just the building?
Yeah, because right now he's got 11. You know, he's also making an argument that the $11 a square foot versus what did he say? $25 per foot. So what would that bring your building improvements down to?
So let me find the square footage for the building. $12.58 a square foot. For the building.
I think that brings it up. So with the building value is 1.57, I think that's.
Yes, the building value was
Revised.
Oh, sorry, it's. 1,570,500.
And the 4 point, like the JCPenney sale was a bankruptcy sale. It was sold September 2020. It probably went up since then. In addition to that was 4.5. So there's this thing. What was the acreage on the JC? And the JCPenney, are you still valuing the JCPenney structure as like $1,000, or has it been, because there's a lease, right? Albemarle County leased it?
They just leased that and.
So it looks like a smaller lot.
It is smaller than that, yes.
Looks like it's actually,
$1,000 on improvements.
actually it is 10, it's still 10 acres, but it's just the land is not as, and you're still assessing it the same, it looks like. But there, the JC Penney land doesn't seem as, but I don't know if it makes sense to do this.
The shape.
The shape of it, 'cause a lot of it
The
uses,
usability.
yeah, the usability. It's good, it's this much. A lot of it's on this side of the Fashion Square Drive.
Yeah, that actually doesn't look as big in that picture to me.
It includes that front, it includes the entrance.
The building is bigger. Also.
I think the revised number is appropriate, but.
Yeah, I mean, we said,
7,289, right?
7,289,3. Is that, are we good with discussion? Should we have a motion? Do we have a motion? It was 7,289,3.
All right, I'll make this. No, wait, did you have one? Oh, okay, I'll make the motion. We adjust the assessment to 7,289,300.
Do we have a second?
a second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thanks. It was 1,570,500 for the improvement. Okay. Next one, we'll go in backwards order. So the Hyatt Place Hotel. That was application number 79. Any discussion there? It seems we've been consistent, or the assessor is consistent with using the income approach for all hotels. There's no, other than, they didn't seem like they were objecting to any specifics as to the income, that the income was correct. It was just that the land was smaller and their comps, which again, we're doing income, so that's equalized. So any further comment on this at the High Place Hotel?
Yeah, I think that was kind of a political argument against taxation.
They didn't like the income approach.
Yeah.
Tell us the value, something like that.
I mean, there are the other value, when every other hotel is being evaluated by income approach, but it's, they can't. So. Do we have a motion then?
Well, I did want to ask a
Sure.
quick question about that, because, you know, I thought he was making an interesting an interesting observation about the location. You know, the superiority of the location of feeling like he was being hit that business room rate. You know, did you ever do an analysis on room rates?
Well, typically they go up as you move down the corridor.
Uh-huh,
So the closer you are to the urban ring,
right.
the higher your rate and the more your occupancy.
So is his rack rate in fact higher than these comparables?
Oh, the comparables
Yeah.
tend to be, the one that's most comparable to him is not, they didn't present it, it's
Right.
Hilton Garden Inn.
Hilton Garden Inn,
Right.
okay,
That would be a similar property, but not on this corridor.
right.
And I think it's actually assessed at a very similar per
Yeah,
per
it was like 100 and,
116, 117.
oh, that's the Holiday Inn South, right?
Oh,
Yeah, that's 116. The Hilton Garden Inn is.
Hilton Garden is actually 100.
Actually assessed at 150. And that's my comment of, you know. Your argument is that you're well run and you're being punished for it, but we've got two other full service properties that are older, one 40 years older, that is assessed at the same because their income shows that they're really at the same level.
Mhm.
So,
Okay.
so yeah, we had no problem with any of those issues.
Mhm.
It's unfortunate because we had to ask to get the actuals. So he was over assessed initially by estimates, and then when we got the actuals, we lowered it from $2.97 million.
What he did.
Right. So
Which she called
but-
nominal, but.
but all of that.
Nice.
The actuals reflect, I mean, we're not making an estimate and
Right.
saying you should be higher because you're
Right.
closer to town.
Right.
But we're reflecting exactly what he's getting.
Mhm. Okay. Okay,
Do we have a motion on this one though?
We affirm the assessment.
Do we have a second?
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right. Now, Mr. Rodriguez property, application number 51. Any discussion here? You might want this one off.
Oh, yeah.
You have it, yeah, 14263.
You want to see the picture, the aerial photograph also?
Oh, it was 14262.
Oh, 262. I'm sorry.
Yes, the aerial, please.
Yeah, that's right.
Where are they, like, what's 14261 assessed at? That's like another larger. Or is that his or no?
I believe he owns it, 14261. Oh, I'm sorry.
I wanted to ask him why he combined the properties, because he could have bought it. At combined.
Oh, yeah.
No,
Probably
yeah,
so.
it wasn't really
That's
from-
why I'm saying.
You're right.
Yeah, he owns that one too.
Yeah.
Correct.
But that one's only 207,000 market value.
Correct.
Is there not a building site on that?
There's a building site on it.
Okay.
Yes, yes. So
But it's
it's
only 5 acres.
correct.
Oh, the second one's only, okay.
Well, this is that third one,
Oh,
really, because he's not appealing this one. This is the next
So
door.
it's just
Where
this property down here.
Oh, okay, so he pretty much got
Okay.
the whole cost.
Which I believe he both combined the parcels together and bought this one just so he wouldn't have any neighbors close.
Mhm.
So in that neighborhood, are there any other large lots or that's it?
No, in this immediate neighborhood,
Yeah.
which only had, and we did separately at one point, only has like 11 parcels, I think.
That might have been, was it a preservation law? Probably not. Probably two pieces. Two
Well, it
pieces.
could have been that one of them was the large preservation, but I don't think so, because then we would actually be treating it as a easement property. If it was a preservation.
Yeah, it's probably two parcels. He got 5 development rights and then 2 21-acre pieces. I bet, but who knows?
That's
Yeah.
possible, yes. That most likely is the case,
Yeah.
yes.
But what's? I think we'll have to take it as to the land and the.
Yeah, that land thing. I mean, I think that proximity to that warehouse is an interesting dilemma.
And does he does have I imagine that property has a view of the Blue Ridge from like between those where that opening is.
Yes, yes, I believe it does have a nice view, a nice view of the open area down to the winery itself, to the vineyard and to the mountains. But let me go back to that one, see what we have. View adjustment, if we have it viewed. But we also, this is a larger size on site. Because the large, huge house that's sitting on it, the area that takes up in the pool and everything else. So we have a size adjustment on it. We also have the location, the same location, all the others. And then, yes, a 1.5 view for those mountains in the winery.
So what's the breakdown of the valuation on the lot? So the home site
Of the
is,
land?
yeah,
We've got the home site at 356.9. And the remaining land at 993.
the first, I think the home site seems appropriate. I mean, maybe should adjust for that warehouse, but on the residual. That seems high. What is the price per acre on that?
24,746.
Especially if it's all, if what he's saying is accurate in terms of the trees. Like that you can't cut down any of the trees.
So not cutting down the trees to us is not a value problem.
Okay.
It actually is something that's going to disqualify him for land use, which I mentioned to him as he was going out
Oh,
there.
really?
But it is not a problem for value of the property, the market value of the property. So
Okay.
The market value typically isn't based on your ability to cut trees on a residential property.
All the restrictions were in place when he.
Yeah,
So,
most people don't want to.
Well, but he bought it along, when he went and he buy the property.
I think he mentioned the restrictions were in place when he bought it. so
Right,
I
right.
wasn't really tripping on that, but in terms of the warehouse, I'm inclined to make an adjustment for that, but not for the restriction.
He paid $600,000 no fine.
Oh, five, and we don't know how many, which parcels, that's
I
just,
believe it was all together at that
That's
point because there's no, well, wait, I'm sorry. Let me look at here. See if there's a. He had it for sale. I don't see
He wanted to do 10 parcel beside
a parcel next door.
the 5 acre parcel. for
Okay.
2010.
But we're talking about he said that this parcel, the main parcel that's 43 acres was actually two parcels that were combined. I don't see. Look at a plat in 2010. Yeah, here we go. A 21.348 acre and a 22.28 acre parcel were combined together in 2010. So
and there is a deed, it says date of sale 2003 transaction.
2005 was the sale.
Okay.
So he paid $600,000. I think that was the
both
number
lots.
for the one lot. And the second lot, I would have to find where that second lot was.
Yeah, it looks like you had a significant increase in the land assessment in 2010.
Yeah,
So you probably bought it.
So was there a tax benefit to combining them as opposed to just keeping them separate? Because he mentioned he bought it so no one would move next door.
right.
But if you could have just bought it and made sure no one moved next door.
Well,
You
there's a
don't have to
tax,
combine it.
well, you only have one home site, well, wouldn't you have two building
So,
sites?
so there is actually, it might not have been intentional for that, but there actually is a benefit to combining it because we would not have a second home site if there's no second home.
Right.
So we would have more value if it was a second parcel.
So that would have been a benefit.
You have the land assessed at
Just
1.35.
Yes,
Nobody can use.
So it's a good location, it's not right by the old trail on the other side of the old trail. Golf course, it's close by, it's pretty convenient, but I don't know if it's. I don't know if anyone has thoughts on, there should be some reduction made for that warehouse, and there's traffic, and the fact that there's. Probably a lot of, like he was mentioning, there's traffic going back and forth to that warehouse. So you-
Noise, maybe? I don't know.
Yeah,
Through
but-
noise.
What type of warehouse?
I meant to ask him this. I don't know what traffic goes this is not a tasting room. It's a. it's a
There's
warehouse.
a lot of traffic back
Probably-
there.
Is it
It's a-
Yeah.
It's a three-wide shed that when I went out and picked that building up.
Equipment in there?
The Kings had like a Jeep they were restoring and I think a couple of sprayers. I mean, there's, yeah.
Yeah, the front end.
Like a.
Oh, it's not closed.
No, it's just like a giant running
It's
shed.
not really a
three-sided.
warehouse.
Oh,
Yeah.
Is that the second one, the one that was just built, the 30 inch?
Just built, the one that peaked, that's that one right there. Yeah, it's just a three-sided open.
Is it open on his side or on the?
Part of it might be enclosed, I can't remember. But they had like some sprayers and it's not like there's any
There we go.
vineyard, yes.
Yeah, there's some.
enclosed, but
There you go.
I think when you get inside, it's all open. But it's not like there's vineyard traffic coming down that.
Okay, there you go.
Yeah, that's the only thing. I mean. The view of it is one thing, the traffic is the only thing I question.
Yeah, it's.
You're on an active vineyard, but. But they have some stuff right behind on his property line too.
It's not awful. I mean, it's not like an eyesore.
But on that like expensive a house, like the buyer, I don't know. There's gonna be some, I think there's some effect. on that.
But I mean, it's out the.
Yeah, it's not, you're not, it's not
Yeah.
angled, the house is definitely angled to look the other way.
I would sell it in the summer when you can't see. Am I not supposed to make jokes or?
feel like unless it really impedes the use and enjoyment of the house, it's this slippery slope to say like, you need to evaluate like a 360-degree view out of every house, you know, like we really don't do that. For other properties.
Is this, the only thing is that house is overbuilt, and which the assessor is taking into account the 20% deduction. It is overbuilt for that spot. You imagine he spent a lot of money. It's a very expensive house. That's a like. I think that is a factor in the way. I mean, I don't think in any other, if it was a $500,000 house and you had that warehouse 500 something feet away from you, not or not, we're calling it a warehouse, but it's like a barn away from you, maybe. I wouldn't really consider it, but on this one, because there's a view, factor, you're adding value for the view right now, right? On your side.
Which this doesn't mean he doesn't see the mountains. Yeah.
Exactly,
So
no, no,
we're
no.
adding for the view.
No, but
yes.
there's,
Yeah.
what is it, 20 or it was 50%?
50% for the view.
Yeah,
correct.
so, but that was just for the building site, though, not the residual. It doesn't apply to the residual, or it does? apply to the residual?
It should apply just to the build,
Just to
the home site, yes,
Okay.
and I'll confirm that, but that's what it should be.
So that's a good thought. I mean, if the argument is the view adjustment is too high, I'm open to that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's hard to just sort of apply absent an already increased adjustment.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, what do we think, though? This one's a really tough one in terms of the comparables or any of this. This is a very unique, like,
Would you adjust for the warehouse? You know,
yeah, that's what, so like Evan's
Yeah.
saying, so it's like, there is a
Yeah.
view, we're adding 50% for the view. Deducting, making that view. Not as big a thing, because there is, your view has some.
So I think because it's on the side, I would not going to make like a huge adjustment,
No.
but maybe like lower that to like 0.35, 0.4, something like that.
Any thoughts, anyone else? So if we say 1.4 versus 1.5,
Evan on that.
I would agree with that.
1.4 or 1.35.
One of the difficulties we have with view, and view is, I'm sure, gonna be an issue on August 1st in our hearings. Is we can't show you the view on this
Yeah.
aerial photograph.
Right,
The view is really something you have to see, and we should have a picture of it to
Yeah.
show you that this is the mountains you see, or this is the.
At a minimum, you can only see it out of one side of the house, right? Which would, and I would sort of argue that the front and back view is what you could build houses around. They're probably worth more than 12.
and it's
5%.
it's 6 months out of the year, like, it's
Yeah.
not like when the trees are there, when the leaves are there, you're not gonna see it. It's
Yeah,
when-
that's a good idea.
Even when the leaves aren't there, the most you're seeing of the building is like the top of that roof. It's not like,
oh,
when the trees are gone, it's not like you're seeing that the full
oh,
exposure of that building. You're just, I mean, there's like a knoll that goes over through those grove of trees to that building. So you're not, I mean, if if you go out to the side of the house and get on your tiptoes, you might see a little more of the building.
Yeah, so that affects my perception as well. I do maybe like 0.4 or 0.45, something like that.
Anyone else have a thought on?
I'm just looking to see if we can find that, what the potential uses are for that building. I mean, is it just a run and shed, or is it a?
Well, it's open most, I mean, there is some closed part, but I mean, it's just, I mean, I would
But
imagine.
once you get inside of it, it's all open. Like I said, when I picked the building up, they had a Jeep they were working on in there, and they had a couple sprayers. That's
it sounds like it's just storage.
pretty much, yeah.
Yeah, typically those, the easements, the restrictions they'll have built into those easement agreements.
Right.
That they can do certain things, whether it's additional dwellings or
Mhm.
additional accessory building. If we change it to. What number do you want?
Let's say 1.4 instead of 1.5.
That would adjust the home site to 333,100.
From.
And now I can't remember what it was. But the total land to 1,326,100
$24,000.
from 1,349,900.
Yeah, $24,000. So we, is that 1.4? The reduction of $24,000 to the building site.
Yeah.
It's not huge, but it's also. There should be some reflected. I don't know what that value is, but I don't know what the number is. But again, like weird. I just wish we had the picture of that view. Let's maybe, if anybody doesn't have any other thoughts right now, let's keep it at the 1.4. Anything on the structure that we should, anything else? Obviously, the improvement did go up quite a bit. The only thing I see with the structure is, I mean, you have the 20%. The only thing is the one that 5% for the neighborhoods. And I feel like those, and that's, we had a couple other ones. I feel like maybe on these bigger houses, that's having a bigger impact. That is not necessarily. Even though the neighborhood adjustment's 5%, that's really for those small, because I think the comps that where that 5% is coming from, you didn't have anything to. The neighborhood sales in the market area are all under $1 million. So that's my potential suggestion there would be to remove that 5%.
That would make it a little more consistent with these other compliments that he provided. You know, that show these, 12, 20, 12, 12, 15, and 20% increases. Versus his was quite.
20 something.
Because they may, I don't know what their, what the adjustments were, what that adjustment was, but. If they're already consistent, if they're in neighborhoods that are more consistent.
Yeah.
Then I would agree with you that perhaps this is a conflated value that has been exaggerated by the fact that he's actually an over improvement.
Yeah, and you already have the L+1 adjustment that you all made this year, which increases. So I don't think we necessarily increase the L+1, leave that what it is.
Right.
But that 5% for this neighborhood because of the fact that this.
That was already.
It is, no, it is, but this year.
Oh,
It sounds like
they
the-
adjusted the, yeah.
Yeah, L+1s went up, a
Yeah,
bigger
yeah,
factor
I got
based on sales.
I got you.
Based on L+1 sales.
Gotcha.
How will we do that with the neighborhood?
Sure.
We just reduce the 5%, what if? The improvement 5%.
But I want to show you. See if there's any, so this is. My favorite place. The three comparables, and on his second to last page. He shows 3 L+1 properties and the increases. The total increase in value. To comparison to his 19%, the 14 and the 17 and the 17. If you see that page. I'm going to tell you if they're in the adjustments on those other files. They all changed about the same amount. Yeah, this is in, so it's the second sale, second property that he's selling. These aren't sales. 1859 Rivanna Farm. That one has a 5% adjustment on the land, 5% for the neighborhood. Also, it changed 17%, has changed 19%. There's one on Dick Woods Road, I'll look at that was market rate 205. And then this one is because when we made that adjustment, both of those adjustments, the additional adjustment for the L+1 and the neighborhood adjustments, it was because of the sales that took place that were both L+1s and the sales that took place in the market areas. Now, we don't always have the full range of sales grades in a market area, but in his, obviously, we don't have any of the larger, the L pluses. But we do in other market areas in which we made both of those adjustments. Okay, that one does not. So out of those three that he lists, one of them also has 5% adjustment.
Rivanna Farm, they have a free union and the coincidence.
Correct.
And if we reduce that the improvement 5% to take that out, would be the revised number?
All right, so this value includes both the land change of the 1.4 and the taking 5% off the improvements. And the value is now total $4,072,300, which is just under $200,000 reduction from where it was.
$4,079,000.
72,300 total value, correct?
So increase about 12%. You know, it's not really, year over year, it's not as.
13%.
Okay. Any further, I mean, I think that's. I think that 5%, I think this is the 5% skews things when you do that market area, because
It's fair.
but. Okay, do we have a motion?
I'll move to reduce the assessment to $4,072,300.
Do we have a second?
I'll second.
All in favor?
Oh,
I'm sorry. Instead of having to come back to this later.
Yeah.
Thank you, Billy. We were having a conversation about this the other day. I make a change, but then I go out to another parcel and I don't save the change. That does not include the 1.4% on the land. Okay, so
24,000.
let me give you the correct numbers here. All right, so this is with a land value of $1,326,100 based on the 1.4 view adjustment. And a $2,722,400 improvement value. For a total value of $4,048,500.
I will move to reduce the assessment to $4,048,500.
Do we have a second?
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye. Sorry about that.
No, thank you for catching on. Okay, so we have one other one that's the 10-15 hearing, which they're not presenting. So let's move to that one. This is application number 17, PID 56002. Owner name's OPZ Bernstein / Christopher 2 LLC. So this is the apartments, another apartment in Stonefields. I guess as the assessor, do you all wish to present?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, we presented everything in our packet, but we'll go over some highlights.
It's 160 unit, 1 and 2 bedroom luxury apartment, 20,000 square feet of commercial space on 2.724 acres in Stonefield. And it was It is currently a grade 1, it's brand new. We estimated the income for the year based on the December 31, 2021 rental, which reflected 290,745 per month, bringing it to 4,488,940 annually. We estimated other income at $1,000 per unit or 160,000 annually. So potential gross is 3,648,940, and we did not apply any rent to the commercial space. We used the model vacancy loss of 5%, $300 a unit for replacement reserve, and the cap rate based on a grade 1 is 4.25%, resulting in apartment value of $50,319,100.
And, we've talked about apartments already. So we have our sales from the region and the cap rates that support our cap rate schedule. In this case, the expenses are based on the rent roll with an appropriate expense ratio based on the current rent, not based on the rent and expenses that would have happened 2 years ago. But the expense ratio should be appropriate in comparison to the income in this case. I think that's all, unless you have some questions, that's all I have.
So I'm not exactly following the numbers that you were saying. This is, I'm looking at this, I'm seeing your effective gross of 3,466,000.
Right,
So,
potential gross.
yeah, or your effective gross.
Oh, okay. The potential gross was 3,648,940, and I believe we used a 5%.
Okay.
Yes, it's right here on the screen now. I'm
Oh,
making it
okay.
bigger so that you can see
Okay.
it better. I'll make it even bigger.
I can see that.
I don't.
I
have that.
can't.
I can see it. So, all right.
Okay.
There you go. So we
Great.
basically have the per unit, basically the rent roll amount times 12 months. We take $1,000 per unit for other income. And then we reduce that by 5% for vacancy to market vacancy to come up with the 3,466,000 that she was referring to.
Well, should I just start?
Sure. Sure.
Okay, I've been thinking about these apartments. And we've got, so you've gone up $10 million on your assessment, right? So that's what does that work out to be in terms of your increased expenses for your, well, let's just use $10 million, okay? Everything else being equal, it increases the expenses by $85,000. So applying the same cap rate to that, that's a, that's a decrease in value or an increase in value, or decrease in value of $1.9 million just by virtue of those additional expenses. And so I think that, I've been thinking a lot about these apartments. I think the cap rate's fine. I think this expense issue, when you're increasing the expense issues and everything else remains the same, that there has to be some shift in terms of your expense ratio. And so I kind of played around with some numbers, not on this one, but I was looking at the MAAP Stonefield.
Oh, MAALP.
Yeah, and I think you went from a 44 to a 42% expense ratio on that. And so I looked at that and I thought, okay, well, if we just hear me out for a moment. So if everything else remains the same and we factor in the additional expenses of the additional taxes on that property, then the value of the property would decrease just by virtue of those additional expenses by $4.5 million. So so I started looking at the expense ratio. I think if you went back to the 44% expense ratio from the 42%, it should just about cover it. In that instance, it would decrease your tax assessment from 79 million of 434,000 to 76 million. 67, 76 million and change. I just don't see any other way of doing it. Because I just think that it's, there has to be some kind of internal reconciliation. And how would that
I
apply?
agree, but it wouldn't apply to this one because we're not actually using the 2-year-old.
Right, you're using the
We're
existing
we're using a market.
percentage of
expense ratio.
expenses, market expense ratio,
Exactly.
okay. But you're using 38%. And so on some of these other newer ones, you're using a higher expense ratio.
Some of them are using a lower also.
Okay.
Yeah, it really
These are
matters.
1 and 2s. Or 1 and 2.
Yeah, it's typically
With 2 bedrooms. Okay.
typically based on the it's based on the amenities and
Okay.
the elevators and stuff like that.
Okay,
I think I agree with you guys that the cost approach is not really a good way to look at it. I guess I was just a little curious about the cap rate. Which I think you guys selected. 1.25. I thought the indicated sales of the other grade 1 properties supported something more like 4.5. Or actually, those were grade 1A.
Yeah.
So that would suggest the need, and one of them was quite recent, 12/16/2022. And then I know, interest rates have gone up since the other sale in October 2021, which I think would affect the cap rate. So I was just wondering why you guys decided to come in below the 1A cap rates from the local sales table.
So just the difference between the grades. So the ones are superior and we have them at a 1/4 point below the 1As.
Okay.
And so the 1As are supported by the local sales at 4.25, 4.5. But the ones are superior, so we have them at a 1/4 point.
Got it. Okay. I had that reversed.
And then we use that further support of the regional sales to support that 4.25.
and I believe you told me that on that page 5, on that Hollymead cap rate at 4.5. That was not the actual cap rate of the sale, right? That's not the actual cap
Actual
rate.
Here we
cap
go.
rate of the sale, yeah, this is where we start talking about pro forma versus historical and all that. The actual cap rate that was reported was 4.3%
4.3 at time of
on
sale.
that sale. The cap rate, I think, we looked at an income sheet.
Oh,
that had
from
a-
CBRE, used a 4.6.
4.9, I thought.
4.9.
Yeah, yeah.
That's a
so-
pro forma.
So it really has to do with the timing of the income that's being
Right.
included to determine that cap rate. So 4.5 is what we used to do the assessment. 4.3 is what
It was
found.
reported.
What was reported was the actual cap rate for the sale.
Right.
But any one of these, we're gonna be assessing them based on the model that, determines the cap rate for that grade. And some of those might have actually sold for a lower cap rate, even the way we do it, using the older, they might have sold for a lower cap rate or a higher cap rate, but we have to create the model to accommodate all of the ones within the same grade with the same grade. As long as the grade's right, then the cap rate should be appropriate.
So do we have for last year, this year, were all the apartments online as of January 1st, 2022?
No.
So the 40 million, was that part of?
I answered that quickly. Let me slow down. I don't believe they were. Because I went out and inspected the property. But my memory might go back further than I'm thinking. The 40 million, is that what the assessment was? 40
million last
year. Then it appears that it was at 100%.
And then what about is it still in lease up? Was it still leased up during 22, going into 22, January 2023, or were they? Was it stabilized by that point?
Got that information on the-
Yeah,
Yeah, so that's not.
that's not the. That was from the.
So I was curious also about the mixed use aspect of it. How that factors in, given the use of the per unit number, it's kind of like if you bring, you gotta check whether that squares, what did you do to value the 20,000 square feet?
We did not.
We actually haven't valued that commercial area at all, as part of our assessment.
It's not being used right now, or?
Correct.
Oh,
It was vacant.
Okay.
Yes. Other than the area that they're using for their rental office and the sign on that.
Okay.
And this, is this the first apartment, mixed use apartment complex that we have
In the county.
in the county?
Yeah. per
Yes,
se.
yes.
That's kind of interesting. I actually would say that, there's there is value associated. They're probably not paying rent for the use of that space. Like, if anything, you're coming too high because of the decision to not value that piece.
Probably too low.
Well, so they're getting value out of it. The value doesn't show up on the operating statement. They would have been to pay rent anywhere else, I guess, which would be decreasing.
For their, but no, but they don't have to pay for the management space or whatever else. All of them have that.
That's like an amenity of the
Yeah.
property itself.
So it's baked in.
Yeah,
They would actually collect more rent than we're reflecting here.
yeah.
If they.
If they were
If
collecting.
it was, yeah, and we're expecting in the future, it will be rented and it'll be part of their statements they give us.
I didn't realize they had commercial space back there. That's probably why they can't rent it. So that's
Yeah, as a percentage, it's not huge, but
Right.
it is a part of it.
still substantial, 20,000 square feet, still a substantial number. Okay, any other further discussion on this? What do you think the tax, I mean, with what Pete said on the tax, are you comfortable with the expense ratio on this one?
Well,
It's the only thing I think I would open question.
I mean, if you base your 37% on other. Your 38% expense ratio on other. Local comparables.
And also, even if we use their system, right, did they exclude the cost of building the 20K in commercial space?
I don't think.
I don't think so.
So, yeah, so the cost of their cost per unit that they've derived here, 233, actually includes the cost of building the 20K in commercial.
That cost, it does say 160 plus the 18.5K on their sheet.
Yeah, that's.
See up at the top. That doesn't include any. Entrepreneurial profit.
Yeah, this is not a full cost approach.
Yeah. It's just kind of a summary.
No contingencies, no.
So I would move to affirm on this one.
Do we have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right, I think we're ready for our next hearing. That over, okay? Excuse me a second. Excuse me, ma'am, are you Miss Wallace or Mr.
Yes,
If you can please have a seat up here. We're ready for you.
Good morning.
Good Morning. We've been recording since our break, right? Since we got back.
We have been,
Okay.
yes, and I'll bring it up and confirm.
Yeah, I've heard, but now I remember, I just want to say.
Yes.
Okay. Good morning and welcome. We are the Board of Equalization. The board is comprised of 5 citizens of Albemarle County who are appointed by the Board of Supervisors. We are an independent board. Here's how the hearing will work. You will have 10 minutes to present your case. The assessor will have 7 minutes to present theirs, and then you'll have another 3 minutes for rebuttal. Please note that per Virginia law, there is a presumption of correctness. The burden of proof is going to be on you as the applicant. Before we begin, I'm going to swear in the witnesses. So if you can please raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony, both oral and documentary, which you're about to give, will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you very much. And that assessor had already sworn earlier today. So
We're still under oath.
yes, they are still under oath. Do you have any questions before you begin?
I don't believe so. I just had one overall comment, which is thank you very much for serving on the BOE. I know it's not an easy job. I was in government myself for 4 years down in Florida. So I really appreciate and thank you for your service.
Thank you very much. And please go ahead and proceed.
Okay, my first point, which I believe I sent an addendum to you, was that upon reviewing my homeowner's insurance, I found out that the cost for complete rebuild of the dwelling was only $414,600. And because I couldn't find homes that exactly matched mine, I looked at the ones that were right on my little private gravel road. And one was the Kakarika's, and we've had 3 out of 5 homes sold within the last few years, and there's been no change for years. So the first one, the Kakarika's, they have 1,900 square feet, and their sale price was $360,000. The assessment $445,600. And then the Gallup's property, which was McDonald's, is 2,344 square feet, which is very comparable to my finished square feet. And their sale price was $315,000, and the assessment now is $430,000. So I have a little bit of difficulty in my mind resolving the issue that mine is now assessed at $635,000. And that seems like such a big difference between $140,000 to $155,000 versus what mine is now assessed at. And it's similar square feet finished, but they have additional amenities, which I don't, such as fireplaces, detached garage, storage sheds, and so forth. This is a prefab house built by, and I believe it's called Better Living, and delivered with walls and windows and placed on site. The beams for the deck and the back have deterioration due to carpenter bees, and the Trex deck is not in very good condition either. And I still have original roof, painting, carpets, vinyl, no improvements since it was built in 2006. This is not Old Trail. This is very rural with wells and septic tank, gravel road and gravel drive. And we have just had, although I realize it didn't go back to 22, but just to demonstrate how old the unit is, we've just had to replace the heat exchanger for the heat. And recently the air conditioning had to have additional work. As I say, the deck is in very poor condition. We still have an ugly solar home, which I think you saw an earlier contest I had to the BOE several years back. And that house is a house that was built by UVA from leftover materials by the engineering department. And I see it from my front yard. my kitchen window looks right out onto this structure. I do not believe that the mass appraisal was appropriate because I don't think it takes all of this into consideration and enact that asset. You look at it primarily as a single property appraisal. And then I went to one of your guiding things, the residential valuation model. And page 15 of the model refers to the neighborhood factor. Again, very modest rural area. The page 16 refers to vision depreciation schedule. And it would indicate for 2006 a 14% physical depreciation. And I'm not sure that was taken into account. And also page 17 talks about economic obsolescence, and it says also external. And that is for issues outside of the property, such as a view, and which mine has been seriously deteriorated by this solar house. So, and then I even looked at where extra features are considered on page 42, and I have almost none of those things that would add the value except a partial generator. So that's basically in addition to whatever I've already presented in my request for the hearing, basically my concerns and why, and I'm not contesting the land value at all. I'm accepting that as is. It's mainly the building improvement at, I don't remember what that was now, it's at 487,800. And as I say, mainly when I realized the two, which was after I asked for the hearing, was based on a valuation of 414,000 by my homeowner's insurance.
Well, thank you very much. Anyone on the board have any questions about him?
So on the material provided from Liberty Mutual, it looked to me like there was a value of 414,600 applied to the dwelling.
Right.
But there was also 41,460 applied to other structures on the premises. Do you know to what that referred?
Oh, yes, I asked about that. And this is a standard thing, I think, among many of the homeowners insurance companies. And they say it's just mandatory that they put that in, even though I really don't have any. I don't understand it, but that was the response I got. So I have absolutely no additional
It's
structure.
just 10% of the other dwelling. So,
Is that what it is?
Yeah.
Okay, I didn't even research that.
Okay.
part.
Any other questions? All right, good assessor.
Thank you. So just in response to the cost that the insurance company is indicating, I would definitely reach out to them and have that updated because it doesn't seem appropriate. And that's really, the insurance value is not the same as market value. And it's not really something that, we would use to indicate market value in any way, but that would concern me. And so the property, we do not adjust for the view of the solar house. I'm not even sure what the solar house looks like, but in this market area, we have sales that indicated that the values needed to increase. And we made adjustments to make sure that happens. We provided, the 6 sales that took place in the market area. And, the assessments are pretty tight in that. And, so the indication of values seems to us appropriate. The property that Wallace is talking about that's sold for 315,000 and assessed for 430,000. That's because the sale isn't from 2020, and the market has changed drastically since 2020 to 2023. And we're using 2022 sales, so it's really 2 years older than the sales we're using, but that market in those 2 years was quite different. It is actually pretty similar in size, 2 full baths. It is quite a bit older. It's a 1.2, it's 1.5 story instead of 1 story, which is inferior per square foot, for the rate. But we don't feel that $315,000 sale is really appropriate in the analysis for a 2023 assessment. And, it's certainly not a surprise that a property that sold for that much 3 years ago would be assessed for that much more at this point. It also, the size of the property is different. The size of, like all rural areas, the size of all the properties vary greatly. As you look at the comparables that Ms. Wallace provided, 29 acres, 2 acres, and 5.6 acres, and hers is 6.6. So, and that is not unusual. They're very large differences in size of the property, in grades of the property, in ages of the properties, and all 3 of those comparables are at minimum 17 years older than the subject property. We provided some comparables also, and those are the same thing. They're with her 6.6 acres, we have comps of 4, 2.8, and 3.65 acres. All of the, again, the grades range from B+2, C-1, so it brackets her home. The sizes bracket her home, but they vary. They're larger and smaller. And the sale prices are above and below hers. But we believe that the assessment based on this information is appropriate based on the market data. I've covered everything there. John, did you have anything? I don't. Do you have anything to add about the solar home that you mentioned?
She did, yeah, she mentioned it to me when I was out there, and you really can't see it that well, but she did, make note that it was there. And I looked at it, and I really don't see where it would really affect the.
Is it that one right? Okay, so it's this property up here. Okay. So you would have to be able to see it through the trees there. Right.
And it's
Yes,
one of those seasonal things when it.
right. When the trees are bare through 5 or 6 months, I can see right into their house.
We don't adjust anything for that.
Any further questions from the board at this time?
So I would ask Peter and his team, are you guys struggling to find like very good comps here? Like I noticed that the comps were B2, B+2 grade and C-1. Although they were all very recent. And so from your perspective, are these like very strong comps, or are these the strongest that were available given, a lack of sales that were, a perfect fit?
Right, so they're the strongest that are available because the most, so if we were in a flat market, we would go back further in time to find houses that were more similar. But the problem is the market change over time is much more drastic and more of an issue that if we did that in this case, there would be more, it would be less accurate. And it would be better to show some. And what we intended to do here is really show a range. And like I said, bracketing was houses that are a lower grade and higher grade, but not extremely. These are pretty close. C+1 and a B are not that far apart. B+2 is a little further, so it's a little higher. But the C1 plus C-1, is not far from a C+1 also. We also didn't have any newer homes that sold in order to reflect value. So the comps we used were just almost as old as the properties that she had used as comps. They vary in condition also and in size, but yeah, we believe that these are just the best comps available. Okay.
So I have a question about just want to make sure that she's understand the consistency between the 3408 Meadowwood Lane
there's about $150,000 difference in the building improvements. And so I understand that there's she's got that full basement, 2,400 square feet. So can you give me an idea of the value of the basement? Because the other one has no basement.
Of 3408.
No, of the,
Hers.
of
Oh, of her
hers.
basement. Oh,
Yeah.
absolutely. Calculate something else. Two basement. It's just an unfinished basement.
Mhm.
Yeah. 34,000, approximately 34,000.
And then the difference between the attached garage and the detached garage is probably significant, with the attached garage being superior.
I would say, yeah, Superior. I don't know if it would be drastically different. Though.
Okay,
The year built. So.
and the year built,
And that's the-
so the rest of it
Yes,
is
that would.
based on the age.
Yes. And it's a slightly lower grade. It is a C and hers is a C plus.
Mhm. So what did you use? What was your depreciation percentage on those two sales?
I'm sorry.
What was your depreciation on those two sales? Did you use a percentage of depreciation?
So the depreciation would have been on our depreciation scale.
Okay,
So on this one, it's 10% based on the age.
okay.
That one, it would have been more,
Uh-huh.
but not
Significant.
not in line.
Yeah, right.
But I can certainly tell you
Okay.
exactly what it would
Just
be.
curious how.
2716. And the write-up that she's talking about with our model in it would have exactly what those
Okay.
tables showed. Um, 13%.
Okay.
So it's not drastic because it's a very slight curve.
Mhm.
So we found that the properties, the improvements do not lose value very quickly.
Right, right.
It's probably true in most places, but. And I'm sorry, and Billy wanted me to point out that the subject under review, when John did the review, we already lowered the value. And that was at least in part by changing the grade from B- 2 to C+1.
Yes, okay.
Any other questions? I'll turn it back to the applicant. Do you have anything else you want to add as rebuttal?
Well, as far as, and you can certainly contact Liberty Mutual, but this was very current, the cost they gave me, and I quizzed them to be sure it included the deck and the porch and any attached things, and they assured me it did, and that was all current. When I submitted my BOE request, I can't remember how many years ago, I did submit pictures of the solar home. And I thought they would still be in your file. I don't have it with me, but if you see it, it's not consistent at all with the construction in the area. So again, I'm not contesting the land value itself at all. I agree with that. And my property, although it is much larger, a good bit of the property, probably at least 4 acres, is not buildable at all because it's steep banks down the back, especially on the backside. We tried walking down at one time and quickly sat down inadvertently and slid down the rest of the way to the bottom. And the front, it also slopes down fairly much because there's a seasonal creek there. So it's sloping down to that. So it's not buildable. The only part that's really buildable, that's flat with the that compares to the similar properties, is probably 2 acres. So that's part of what I consider. And I'm wondering where the comps are located physically that you used the more recent sales you said, because I I didn't find any that I could really use as comps, but. You know,
So, well, we have their addresses, Coleman Drive. There's Sandy and Whitehall Road.
Sandy,
Sandy Place.
I have no idea where these are.
They're a little ways down Garth Road. If you go past Wine Store.
Oh,
And then-
okay,
and
so
the
they're
Whitehall.
several miles away.
Yeah, as we said, they're the most recent appropriate sales. And we're not saying that they're right next door or anything like that.
Right.
And I just want to say that we are assessing the property based on the 2-acre home site for the existing home, no other ability to, no other home sites at all. And we are reducing the residual land by topography by 25% for that.
Any further questions from the board? Anything further like that?
I don't believe so.
Well, thank you so much for your time. We will review with the and we'll mail out a decision for the next 2 weeks.
Appreciate it. I appreciate your time. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Do you remember how long ago you came to the board? Because I don't have any record.
About the solar house.
About the coming to the board of equalization about the value.
Yeah, and that was very much related to that solar house that's there. That was won in a lottery. I don't think they could have sold it to anybody.
But it was.
And I came in and I presented pictures
Right.
and it was in a different room. It wasn't here. It was
Okay,
down
okay.
at the other end
Okay.
near the
It must have been a
supervisors.
while ago.
Oh, that's what I was thinking. You might remember when, because yes, it has been.
I was thinking it was before me. It must have been more than 8 years ago.
It's very likely.
Okay,
It's
okay.
very likely
All right.
because I can't believe it, but I've
think
been
it
there
was 2000.
16.
Yeah.
2007, if I remember right, I think. it was
That
in
would have
there.
been shortly after I moved, probably, yeah.
Well, thank you, ma'am.
Thank
It's
you,
nice meeting
sir.
you.
It was
Thank you.
nice to meet you and
Thank
thank you, Mr. French. And Thank you very
I'm
much for
John.
your help,
Yes, ma'am.
John. Yes, I remember. Thank you. Okay, you guys have a great rest of the beautiful day. Thank you very much.
Thanks, ma'am.
Bye-bye. Hope you get home early today with moving up some of the.
Before we start this, I just scheduling for Friday. We're talking about, I was just trying to think of this Westfield Road one in terms of when we're gonna hear it. Do we have gaps? Do we have some openings?
Okay, Bill, you have that scheduled with you.
That's not
We don't. You don't have gaps during the day.
Okay.
But we don't start till 9 o'clock, so you could come in at 8:30 and hear it. But we do have groupings. We have 4 properties that start at 9. That are all apartments.
Okay.
So basically you have 2 hours set aside for those 4 apartments that you're most likely going to go through
Quicker than that. Yeah.
relatively quickly. You also have a group of 3 properties that are all the very exact residential properties, very exact same issue.
Okay.
That
Same
are
representative.
1:30 to 3. Yeah.
Oh,
the
this is
same
the,
owner.
yeah, that's right. Same. owner.
Yeah, and that one, I'm sure you're gonna have extra time. So
Okay. All right, so
you should be able to do it just in that.
before we address this property, so should we go ahead and table this till, I mean, it's not on the schedule for today anyways, but this is the packet we got this one. Go ahead and do this on Friday. Okay. All right. So going back to this one, this was application number 1. huh?
Yes. very
Oh,
first
wow.
one.
I think she should get a bonus for being number 1.
You definitely wanted to give it.
Okay, you mind pulling up the property again?
Oh, sure. You want to see the video or, I mean, the picture?
Yeah. Okay, so does anybody have any comments?
So I thought that from a sales comparison approach, probably they're right, 2020 is too old.
Right.
But I found the comparables that she submitted to be somewhat compelling. 3408 Meadowwood Lane. So she checked the box, my property is appraised too high in comparison to other appraisals by
nearby surrounding properties that are similar. And I thought comp 2 and comp 3 were both of interest and the request for the change that she's made is modest, and that's not an equitable factor, it's an observation, as there's like a degree of there's a margin of error in any comps, even the sales, and especially the sales approach where Peter and his team have said there's not a great set of comps here, and I don't think either side would claim that they've got an exact match. But I think that she made some good points about extra features on comp 2 and 3 that were somewhat persuasive to me. That in comparison to those, the property does seem to be appraised perhaps a little higher than would be indicated.
So what's, can we pull up those and see what why there is a difference? Yes.
So.
Especially that comp 2, because that's the one where we have the $37,000 difference in the basement, that's it. And, you know, it's that would bring their land, their.
So should we start with that one? Was that 34, is that 3408?
Just to kind of clean up, hopefully our process for decision making, I think I agree with Peter that the insurance dwelling coverage really is not reliable. We can't consider that. It's a minimum, and, you know, they want you to have a minimum in place, but it certainly doesn't represent the actual cost of.
Or the market value, that was, and we're not looking at costs, and so.
So one of the other differences in this property is the fact that it's 1.5 story instead of a 1 story with hers. So hers would be more valuable as an entire 1 story and this one as a 1.5. So if this one was a 1 story, it would be assessed higher.
Why would an extra half story be a negative factor?
The per square foot. So because we're setting these rates per square foot, so because there's more demand for the first floor on a house than there is for the second floor. So just for example, if this house was this is this comp number 2. If this house was a 1 story, same size, we would be assessing it at $473 instead of $430. So that's $43,000 difference there.
I see.
On top of the 30, what did we say about $38,000 in the basement?
Yeah.
So that's a difference also.
Is that for 1.25 story? Because it's got the 2 1-story wings on it.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. So that brings you up about 80,000. That's about cheap.
Right. And then we have the difference in, there's the acreage difference. So the land's also different. And we have different, we have $50,000 difference in the land values.
Well, I'm
between
not
the two.
concerned about the land.
No, I know, but
Okay.
still, if you're looking at comparing the total.
No, I was comparing the building values.
Okay.
The
All right.
improvement, there's $150,000 difference in just the building value.
Okay, well,
Okay.
I was looking at the
Okay.
430,000 compared to 635.
Right. Okay.
So, but you're right, there's $200,000 difference.
Okay.
The other part of the difference is if this one comp 2 was a C+1, it would now be worth 5.1. I mean, it's $516,000.
Mhm.
The other differences, there's 60 square feet difference in square footage, the same grade, I mean, same condition.
Percent depreciation.
The 3% depreciation difference. So, you know, I'm just doing this
Yeah.
hypothetically if these were different, but if this was built in the same year, so 2006, then you would now be at 530. There's other differences. You're still
The
$100,000.
basement of the high.
Okay, the basement, if it had the basement, that would add 38,000, so that would be 568.
And there was the garage difference, but you said it was not that significant, right? The detached versus.
I don't think there would be that
Okay.
much of a difference between the two.
Still seems like there's about a $50,000.
Yeah, so if you add up those adjustments that we just reviewed, it's 118,000. That accounts for 118 of the roughly 200K difference in the.
150.
Because 50K is the land.
Right.
So 32, we're still missing 32.
Now, she does have a whole house generator, so that we add 8,800, I believe, for that.
Did she describe that as a partial generator?
She said, that's what she said, but I don't know what that means.
Maybe it just.
Only power some of the.
Well, it wouldn't be a small, like a portable generator. Now there's some that you can run your air conditioner on, you know, your whole house generator, and there's some that, you know, does your main survival stuff. I'm sure there are other differences in here, that would cause that. I mean, obviously, the same model.
Bathrooms.
It's the same neighborhood adjustments. It's the bathrooms should be the same. They're both two full. Oh, the 60 square feet difference also. We can certainly change. Where do we change that? Though? We have to change that.
I guess my only other question, looking at this picture of this house, the comparable, this looks like a really, like really nice house, stone fireplace, and everything like that. So I'm just wondering about, like the grade selection, when she said this is a modular home, that this is a modular.
Right.
So you were in it.
I heard her say that.
Uh-huh.
I wasn't, what I was told was they built the house themselves. That's what her and her husband told me, that they basically subcontracted it out themselves and did the work. They never said anything about the house being a modular. It didn't look like a modular. I mean, it, and that's why I adjusted the grade for the basic finishes. I mean, there's nothing fancy inside that fireplace, but.
Okay.
And what is the 8,200 need extra features? Is that the deck?
That's the generator, right?
Oh, yes.
That's one of the benefits of the model is that we have all of these differences. I mean, one of the board members in the past used to always like to do these kind of quick and dirty per square foot on this comp, the subject in the 3 comps,
Right.
but it didn't take into account any of the differences that we're talking about.
Right.
And all of these, because of the fact that it's in the model and the computer's calculating all the differences, and based on that model, everything is getting accounted for.
Right.
Now, the question is, in my mind, the question is the grade right? Is the square footage right? Is all of these things, are they correct?
Right.
But the calculation of it is calculating differently for different buildings properly.
Yeah, I think once you sort of make some of those adjustments, I'm sure there are others, it ends up being fairly close. And
Yeah, so then it comes down to an issue of grade. And you were in the property, and so, and were you in that other property at
No, I wasn't in the other with the stone fireplace. No, I mean, but also I think I made a note on that other one. That thing sold, of course, in 2020. It needed some work. It needed, that wasn't the sale price in 2020 that even she told me that. It
Oh,
needed
yeah.
some work. Of course, again, it's 2020.
Right.
And yeah, looking at the pictures on this house, it's C+1
Yeah, okay,
is definitely not overgrading it,
okay.
at least from the outside. And then, of course, John saw the inside.
I think from the one angle, it's a little different than when you see the other angle.
Yeah.
The condition, that was the other thing, but I mean, shouldn't argue too
It's
hard a
about her
condition,
deck.
the deck, yeah.
It's just her deck.
Any other comments, motion?
I'm gonna do it for this one.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right, do we have a motion to adjourn now? No
I
one's
moved to
I'm
adjourn.
about to say, no one's. have a second?
I'll say.
All right, all in favor?
Alright,
All right.
9 o'clock Friday morning, you don't want to start early because there's
No,
gonna
I
be
think
plenty
we'll,
of time.
I think we'll have time.
Okay, 9 o'clock Friday morning.
That's for this one right here.
No, that one's gonna just be, we'll fit that in.
That's what I mean.
Oh, yeah, we'll just fit that in when we can. I think.
Yeah, I'm getting to it.
No.